So before we begin anything relating to actually building and designing our templates and creating our repeating patterns, I want to go over some of the updated interface options within Affinity Designer. So I have Affinity opened already. Things are a little bit different when it comes to your opening interface. You have a lot of the same options like new and open and different templates that you can load. But the big thing that I've noticed in terms of copying and editing files is we're going to be utilizing some of their swipe functions. So if you can tap to open, or if we go back out, you can take a finger and swipe left and you'll be able to access some of these quick options. So we can edit the name of your file, and then we can also duplicate a file. We can save a file, and then we can save as a file. So this will allow you to save them into your file system. Typically, you would have been able to see this in the past in the hamburger menu here. You have the save as, rename, but you'd also have things like duplicate there, but that's no longer there. You utilize the swipe function, so you'll swipe left to access that. All right, so what I'm going to do is set up a new file so that we can kind of play around and review some of the studios and the tools and see how things are a little bit different in Affinity 2 versus Affinity 1 on your iPad. So I'm going to select on the left-hand side, new, and I'm going to select new document, and I'm just going to set up a basic letter size. So they have all of these different options here. You have print options, press ready, photo, web, and different device sizes, etc. So I'm just going to select a basic 8.5 by 11 letter option here. So we're just going to keep the general 8.5 by 11 settings. I'm going to keep it at 300 DPI just in case I wanted to print something out, but you can adjust your DPI as needed. For websites like Spoonflower, they often suggest 150 DPI. And then I'm going to keep my units at inches, but you can also adjust it to feet, yards, millimeters, centimeters, etc. Once I've updated that, I'm going to keep my color format RGB because if I were to upload this to say something like Spoonflower, they typically accept RGB. But if you're working on a client project or you're working on any type of project that may be printed, you might have to use something like CMYK. I would suggest that you touch base with your client or with whatever manufacturer you're working with just to double check what their specs are. Once you've updated all of this, what we're going to do is select create an artboard and then hit OK. And before we work in this file really quickly, I want to go back out into our main gallery, and on the very bottom in your lower left hand side we have our settings options here. I'm going to tap on that and I'm going to go into my user interface, and I'm going to adjust my background gray level just so that there's a differentiation between the paper artboard and the actual background. I just do this so it's a little bit easier for you all to see on screen as I'm working. All right, so now that I have this set up, what I want to do is kind of go through some of the studios and some of the tools and highlight some differences and some of the tools that we'll likely utilize as we work through creating our repeating patterns. So the first thing I want to highlight is you have these options, and you have these in Affinity 1 as well, in Affinity Designer version 1, but I like to utilize these a bit more. We have assets that we can pull in to our work really easily. Say you create a whole set of motifs that you want to utilize. Typically I would just create another artboard and paste all the motifs to the side and drag things in. But if you want to make things a little bit more neat, you can utilize assets. So for example, if we scroll down on our right hand studio, there is the setting right below our type studio, and that is our asset studio. So there are already some pre-loaded assets that Affinity Designer has included in your application. So the simply flat icons, and there's a bunch of different icons that you can utilize, but you can also pull in your own assets. So I have a set that I'm going to be working with today for our practice. These aren't going to be the actual designs that we'll be using for the pattern repeats that we're going to be making today, but these are going to be my practice sets, and I loaded these in, and I'll show you really quickly how to utilize these assets and how to load them in. So I'm going to go out into my gallery. I already have these assets drawn on an artboard for a project that I've been working on. So these are completed. Everything is all grouped together and finalized. What I'm going to do is select all of them by selecting my move tool and dragging over all of these icons. And if you didn't select all of them, you can just hold your finger down on the screen and then tap on the additional elements so that everything is all outlined in blue, and that's how you know everything is selected. And then you can go into your asset studio. I already have loaded them, but what we can do is create a new category, and you can name the category. I'm just going to keep it unnamed for now to show you the example. And then we can add a subcategory, and then what we can do is select this little 3-line kind of like hamburger menu here, and then you're going to select add assets from selection, and all of the selected icons that you've created are now loaded in as an asset set. I already have this loaded, so what I'm going to do is delete it. So I'm going to select that hamburger menu again, and I'm going to select delete subcategory, select yes, and then I'm going to go in here to my upper hamburger menu, and I'm going to select delete category and select yes. So I have my practice florals already loaded, and this is a great way to kind of keep things organized and easy to access. So if I go back into my file here, I can open up my assets, and I can just tap on them and select insert, and I can load them all up into my file here. And then I can move them using the move tool. I can resize if I want to keep everything in proportion. I just need to hold my finger down. And then I can use the black arrow tool to move and adjust and resize things. Since they are vectors, I am not concerned with anything becoming pixelated because they are vectors and we don't have to worry about that. I'm going to tap on my Asset Studio here to pull it in. All right, and I've pulled all of these little icons in, and then what we're going to do, so some of the studios I want to explore first here. So we've looked at the Asset Studio. I also want to look at our Transform Studio, which is one of the major studios that I utilize when I'm working in Affinity Designer. Say I want to have all of these lined up at the bottom. Obviously, we can utilize our align functions, and you'll be able to find those here. What's also nice though is that you can find them in other places on your in your app. So at the top here, we have our align, flip, rotate, and our order functions as quick options. So you don't just have to go into the Transform Studio. You can select these little center icons. Your align functions are here, as well as your flip and rotate and your arrangement. So if we select our arrangement, you can move your icons front to back and reorder the layers. If we go to our flip rotate, we can flip horizontal and vertical. If we go to our align tools, obviously we can align left, center, right, space them horizontally, align top, bottom, etc. I'm going to align them to the bottom, and that pulls everything so it's in a nice straight line. All right, so one of the big things that I notice is the way you edit your functions and your different effects. So say for example, I have this flower here, I want to add a shadow. I'd go into my effects studio. So if I tap on the actual flower using my black arrow tool, my move tool, and then I select effects. Typically when we would tap on any of these effects, so let's say I select that outer shadow, and I turn it on by tapping on the little like circle icon here to move the switch to the right. Typically you would see a pop-up at the bottom that would allow you to adjust your different settings. Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, you have your options. So you're able to adjust how wide out the radius of the shadow goes, how opaque or transparent the shadow is by scrolling up or down, and then you can adjust the offset at the bottom here. So that's a big thing here, is that a lot of these settings have changed so that they are on this left hand scroll bar. You still can manually adjust these as well by tapping on the actual numbers, and you'll get the little like calculator pop up that will allow you to manually enter numbers. And you can do that with the percentages as well. And each of these options, you're able to actually manually enter the actual percentage or number that you want. Another helpful tip to look at in terms of some updates with the interface is utilizing, again, those swipe options. So if we're in the Layer Studio, we can swipe right and it'll kind of give you a mini version so that it doesn't take up so much of your workspace. And then to pull it back to normal, you can just swipe over it with 2 fingers and swipe left. You can also, when you're working in it, you can swipe over each individual layer and it'll allow you to adjust those layers. You can lock them. You have all of these different quick options here, like multiply, darken for all of your different settings for those specific elements on that layer. And then you could also minimize it even more by selecting the drop down arrow so you can see all of the different elements within that single layer. And then again, you just swipe out to access these quick options, and then 2 fingers to swipe on the layers to pull it back so that it's its full options, which I think is really helpful in terms of kind of just making things a little bit more accessible and easy to use your hands with to edit and revise, or to kind of make room as you're working on your pieces within your file. And speaking of the swipe option, so I'm going to tap on my layers to pull it back in. You can also use the 3-finger swipe down to access any of your quick edit options. So you can do things like group elements, select all, zoom in, rasterize. You can duplicate, copy, cut, paste, and then delete elements off your screen as well here. And then you can just tap out to remove that. You still have all of those options up here in your menu options, but these are just like some quick options. So those are kind of like the main things that I see are relevant and important within Affinity 2. Obviously, there is a ton more, but I just wanted to touch on a few things that I know we'll be using as we work through this.